Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
One day, our little HOA was just collecting dues for landscaping and pool maintenance. The next, it was like a hostile takeover. Spencer Reed, the new president, moved in about 6 months ago, all smiles and organic kale recipes. He ran on a platform of community revitalization and sustainable living, which sounded harmless enough at the time. Then, barely a month after the election, the emergency meeting notice landed in my mailbox. Not a casual email, mind you, but a thick, official-looking envelope with a seal that looked like it was designed by a medieval cult. The meeting itself was a farce. Spencer, flanked by a couple of new board members I barely recognized, a quiet woman named Phoebe Jennings and a slick-haired guy, Julian Drake, stood at the podium like he was addressing the UN. He started talking about the dire need for our community to align with modern ecological imperatives. My eyes glazed over a bit until he dropped the bomb, a new emergency bylaw, effective immediately. It mandated internal energy efficiency audits for every single home, HVAC, plumbing, electrical wiring, the whole 9 yards. He claimed it was to meet some new, vague, green living standards they'd unilaterally adopted. I remember looking around the room, seeing a few confused faces, but mostly just nods. People were either too polite or too stunned to object. Then came the contractor, Eco Solutions Now, a name so generic it practically screamed scam. Their flyers, which appeared under my door the very next morning, quoted prices that made my jaw drop. We're talking thousands of dollars for what sounded like a glorified home inspection. I called the number, pretended to be interested, and the guy on the other end, who sounded like he was reading from a script, kept pushing for an immediate appointment. Limited slots, high demand, community-wide initiative, he chirped. I asked about their qualifications, and he just rattled off some acronyms I'd never heard of. It felt wrong, every bit of it. I decided right then and there I wasn't letting them anywhere near my house. My home is my sanctuary. What they were asking for was an invasion of privacy, a violation of my property rights. So, when the official letter arrived, demanding access by the end of the week, I sent back a polite but firm refusal. I cited privacy, property rights, and the complete lack of any legitimate local or federal mandate for such an intrusive audit. I even suggested they focus on common areas if they were so keen on green living. Then came the second letter, delivered by hand by Julian Drake himself, who smirked as he handed it to me. This one threatened to cut off my water and electricity. The bylaw grants the HOA authority to mitigate energy waste by any means necessary, including disabling utilities of non-compliant residents, it read. I stared at the words, disbelief warring with a rising fury. They were going to turn off my utilities? Over an HVAC inspection? This wasn't an HOA, it was a dictatorship. The next morning, I was still reeling when I heard a commotion outside. I looked out my window and saw Spencer Reed, Julian Drake, and two burly guys in Eco Solutions Now uniforms standing on my lawn. One of them was holding a clipboard, another a toolbox. Spencer was pointing at my front door, talking animatedly. I watched as Julian walked up to my porch, a smug look on his face, and actually tried the doorknob. My heart hammered against my ribs. I threw open the door, stepping out onto the porch. What do you think you're doing? I demanded, my voice tight. Spencer stepped forward, his usual smile replaced by a hard, determined set to his jaw. We're here to perform the mandated audit, as per the emergency bylaw. You are not coming into my house, I stated, my voice low and steady despite the tremor in my hands. You have no right. Julian chimed in. We have a community warrant, actually, for non-compliance. He held up a piece of paper that looked like it had been printed off a cheap template. It was nothing more than a letterhead with some legal-sounding jargon. That's not a real warrant, I shot back, my voice rising. Get off my property, all of you, or I'm calling the police and filing a restraining order. The two burly guys took a step forward, their eyes narrowed. Spencer's face darkened. You're making a big mistake, he said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. This is for the good of the community. I stood my ground, blocking the doorway. The air crackled with tension. It was a standoff, me against them, on my own porch. I knew this was just the beginning, but I had no idea how far they were willing to go. The standoff on my porch felt like an eternity. Spencer's eyes were cold, calculating. Julian just stood there, a smirk still plastered on his face, enjoying every second. The two eco-solutions goons looked ready to physically push past me. My hand instinctively went for my phone in my pocket. Last chance, I warned, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts. Get off my property, or I'm calling the police. Spencer scoffed. You think the police care about HOA bylaws? We're a private entity. This is a community matter. Trespassing is a police matter, I retorted, pulling out my phone and dialing 911. And attempting to force entry into a private residence certainly is. Their bravado faltered for a split second when they heard me speak to the dispatcher. Yes, I need police at my address. I have individuals attempting to illegally enter my home under false pretenses, claiming to be from the HOA. I kept my voice loud enough for them to hear every word. The two eco-solutions guys shifted uncomfortably. Julian's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. Spencer, however, doubled down. This is harassment. We are merely attempting to enforce community standards. Community standards don't supersede the law, Spencer, I shot back, keeping my eyes on them. Within minutes, a patrol car pulled up. Officer Miles Donovan, a tall, calm man I recognized from around the neighborhood, stepped out. He took in the scene, me on my porch, the 3 HOA representatives, and the 2 contractors. Everything all right here? Officer Donovan asked, his gaze sweeping over the group. Spencer immediately launched into a theatrical explanation, waving his community warrant paper. Officer, this resident is refusing a mandatory energy audit. It's an emergency bylaw, crucial for our community's sustainability. Officer Donovan took the paper, barely glancing at it. He then turned to me. Sir, are these individuals attempting to enter your home against your will? Yes, officer, I confirmed. They're threatening to cut off my utilities and have already tried my doorknob. They're also fining me $500 a day for refusing this bogus audit. Officer Donovan's expression hardened. He handed the warrant back to Julian. This is an illegal warrant. You cannot force entry into a private residence without a court order. And threatening utility disconnection without proper legal process is also highly illegal. I suggest you all leave this property immediately. Spencer's face turned a shade of puce. But the bylaw. The board voted. Bylaws don't override the law, sir, Officer Donovan stated firmly. This is a civil matter, and if you persist in attempting to enter this property, it becomes a criminal one. I'll need you all to disperse. Defeated, Spencer, Julian, and Phoebe, who had been standing silently behind them, exchanged frustrated glances. The eco-solutions guys looked relieved to be told to leave. They muttered something about just doing their job as they packed up their tools. As they retreated to Spencer's car, Spencer glared back at me. This isn't over, he hissed, his voice low and venomous. You'll regret this. We have ways. I watched them drive off, a cold knot forming in my stomach. The police had diffused the immediate threat, but Spencer's parting words echoed in my ears. I knew he wasn't just blowing smoke. He had something else up his sleeve, and I had a terrible feeling it was going to hit me where it hurt the most. The immediate aftermath of Officer Donovan's visit left me with a strange mix of relief and unease. The police had left. Spencer and his cronies had retreated, but his parting words, "We have ways," echoed in my ears. I knew he wasn't one to back down. This wasn't just about some bylaw. It felt personal. I spent the rest of the day feeling like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Did you get the notice about the landscaping? She whispered. My husband, Lucas, just found one. They're saying our rose bushes are non-compliant. They just hit me with one about my grass, I replied, my voice tight. It's ridiculous. They're just trying to find new ways to fine us. It's Spencer, Lila said, her voice laced with frustration. He cornered Lucas at the mailbox yesterday, going on about community responsibility. Lucas said he looked like he was barely holding it together, like he was obsessed. Obsessed is right, I muttered. They're trying to bleed us dry. The next week was a blur of phone calls to lawyers, trying to figure out how to fight this new, equally baseless attack. The fines kept accumulating, a digital counter ticking up in my mind. Then, one evening, I was taking out the trash when I saw Julian Drake parked down the street, just sitting in his car, watching my house. He didn't even try to hide it. He just stared, a faint smile on his lips. My skin crawled. The following morning, I woke up to a new problem. My internet was out. I called the provider, and they said there was an unusual service interruption at my address. Something about a signal interference coming from within the community. They couldn't send a technician for 2 days. This felt too convenient, too specific. I looked out my window, and across the street, Spencer was standing on his porch, sipping coffee, watching. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. He just raised his cup in a slow, deliberate toast. That afternoon, a package arrived, seemingly from a generic online retailer. Inside, nestled among packing peanuts, was a small, unmarked USB drive. There was no return address, no note, nothing. My heart pounded. Who sent this? Was it a trap, a warning, or something else entirely? I hesitated, then plugged it into an old, isolated laptop I rarely used. A single file appeared on the screen, Project Greenlight_budget. I clicked it open, and what I saw made my blood run cold. It was a detailed, highly suspicious financial breakdown, showing massive, inflated payments from the HOA's Community Sustainability Fund directly to Eco Solutions Now for services far beyond simple audits or landscaping. And the dates on some of the payments? They predated Spencer Reed's election to the board. This wasn't just about control. It was about something far more sinister. Something that went deep into the HOA's pockets, and perhaps even deeper into its past. The Project Greenlight_budget file was a rabbit hole, and I plunged headfirst. The old laptop hummed as I scrolled through rows and columns, my heart hammering with each new discovery. The initial entries were staggering. Millions of dollars funneled from the HOA's Community Sustainability Fund into Eco Solutions Now for consulting fees and pre-audit assessments that predated Spencer's election by nearly a year. It wasn't just inflated prices. It was outright embezzlement on a scale I couldn't have imagined. There were also smaller, recurring payments to a shell company called Evergreen Holdings, which, a quick online search revealed, was registered to an address that turned out to be a P.O. box in a different state, and its sole director was a distant relative of Julian Drake. This wasn't just about control. It was a sophisticated money laundering operation, using the HOA as a front. I spent hours printing out key sections, highlighting suspicious transactions. The more I dug, the clearer the picture became. Spencer wasn't the mastermind. He was the charismatic face, the enforcer. Julian was the financial architect, and Phoebe Jennings, the quiet board member, seemed to be the one handling the paperwork, ensuring the fabricated bylaws and resolutions passed without a hitch. They were systematically draining the community's funds, and the efficiency audits were just a convenient, legal-sounding pretext to access homes and justify exorbitant fees. The next morning, armed with a thick folder of printouts, I called Lila. "You need to come over," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I think I know what's really going on." She arrived with Lucas, both looking tired and worried from their own landscaping notice. As I laid out the spreadsheet, pointing to the figures, their faces went from confusion to disbelief, then to anger. This is criminal," Lucas breathed, his eyes wide. "They're stealing from us." "Exactly," I confirmed. "And the audits? The landscaping? It's all just a smokescreen to justify these massive payments to their own company. We have to go to the police, the media, everyone," Lila exclaimed, her hands trembling. "We will," I assured her, "but we need to be smart. They're dangerous." Spencer's threats weren't empty. Later that day, I saw Spencer and Julian driving slowly past my house, their heads turned, watching. It was a chilling reminder that they knew something was up. I decided to send an anonymous email to every resident in the community, attaching a redacted version of the budget spreadsheet, along with a brief, factual explanation of what I found. I urged everyone to look at their own HOA statements and question the recent initiatives. I hit send, my finger hovering over the mouse, knowing there was no turning back. The response was immediate. My phone started buzzing with calls and texts from confused, then outraged neighbors. People were checking their statements, comparing notes, and the anger was spreading like wildfire. Declan Hart, a retired accountant a few streets over, called me, his voice tight with fury. "I've been looking at my statements," he said. "The Community Sustainability Fund line item has quadrupled in the last year alone. I thought it was just inflation, but this is sickening. Can you help us make sense of it all? I asked, feeling a surge of hope. We need someone with your expertise. Consider it done, Declan replied. This Spencer Reed and his cronies, they're going to regret this. But the HOA's retaliation was swift and brutal. That evening, as I was sitting in my living room, the lights suddenly flickered and died. Not just my house, but the entire block. I heard shouts from outside. My heart pounded. This wasn't a general outage. My internet had been out, and now this. A few minutes later, my phone, which was charging, suddenly went dead. The power had been cut to my house specifically, and perhaps a few others who had been vocal. Then, a loud crash echoed from my backyard. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It sounded like something heavy had hit my back fence. I grabbed a flashlight and crept towards the back door, my mind racing. Had they finally gone too far? Was this a warning? Or something worse? I peered through the window, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. My back gate lay splintered on the ground, and a large, dark figure was just disappearing into the shadows of the alleyway. But it wasn't just a figure. As the flashlight beam swept across the ground, it illuminated a small, crudely drawn symbol spray painted on the remains of my fence. A stylized, menacing E with a $sign through it. E for Eco Solutions now. And the $sign, a clear message. They knew I had the budget, and they were coming for me. The splintered fence and that crude, menacing E with a $sign burned into my mind. They knew. They absolutely knew. The power cut, the internet outage, the broken fence. It wasn't just harassment anymore. It was a direct threat. My heart was a drum against my ribs. But beneath the fear, a cold resolve settled in. This wasn't just about my property anymore. It was about protecting my home, my neighbors, and stopping these criminals. The next morning, the community was buzzing. My anonymous email had done its job. People were comparing notes, sharing their own ridiculous notices, and the outrage was simmering. The power outage had hit more than just my house. It had affected a few other vocal critics, making it impossible to ignore. Lila and Lucas were at my door before dawn, their faces grim. My power's out too, Lila said, her voice tight, and so is Declan Hart's. This isn't a coincidence. They know, I confirmed, leading them to the backyard to show them the fence. Lucas swore under his breath when he saw the symbol. We can't just call the police again, he said. They'll say it's just vandalism. We need to hit them where it hurts. We have the budget, I reminded them, holding up my folder. And we have a community that's finally awake. We decided to call an emergency community meeting ourselves, bypassing the HOA board entirely. We spread the word through texts, calls, and knocking on doors. By evening, my living room and front yard were packed. Neighbors I'd only ever waved to were there, their faces a mixture of anger and concern. Spencer, Julian, and Phoebe were nowhere to be seen. I stood before them, the folder clutched in my hand. For months, I began, my voice clear and steady. This HOA board has been operating under false pretenses. They've levied illegal fines, threatened our utilities, and tried to force their way into our homes, all under the guise of green living. I held up the spreadsheet. But it's not about green living. It's about greenbacks. Your greenbacks. I laid out the evidence, the inflated contracts, the shell company, the payments predating Spencer's election. I explained how Eco Solutions Now was nothing more than a front for Julian's illicit dealings, with Spencer as the public face and Phoebe as the silent enabler. A collective gasp went through the crowd, followed by a low murmur of furious whispers. They've stolen millions from our community fund, I concluded, and they've used their power to intimidate anyone who dared to question them. The meeting erupted. People shared their own stories of intimidation, of being pressured into expensive audits, of feeling helpless. The anger was no longer simmering. It was boiling over. Someone suggested a recall vote. Someone else yelled, lawsuit. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Armed with the evidence, a group of us, led by Lila and Lucas, filed a formal complaint with the state's attorney general's office and the local police. We presented the detailed financial records, the bogus bylaws, the daily fines, and the accounts of threats and attempted forced entry. The sheer volume of complaints from multiple residents, coupled with the undeniable financial irregularities, made it impossible to ignore. The investigation was swift. Spencer Reed, Julian Drake, and Phoebe Jennings were formally charged with fraud, embezzlement, and multiple counts of harassment. News spread through the community like wildfire. I saw Spencer being led away in handcuffs, his face pale and his usual smugness replaced by a look of utter defeat. Julian, too, was arrested, his slick hair disheveled, shouting about misunderstandings. Phoebe, surprisingly, was the only one who seemed to break, reportedly cooperating with authorities in exchange for a lighter sentence. The HOA board was dissolved. Eco Solutions Now was shut down, its assets frozen. The fines against me and other residents were immediately rescinded. It was a victory, a complete and utter destruction of the corrupt regime that had terrorized our community. The aftermath was a festering wound. The community fund was not just depleted, it was gutted, leaving a gaping void that would take a generation to fill, if ever. Trust wasn't shattered, it was incinerated, leaving behind only the ash of suspicion and the acrid stench of betrayal. Neighbors didn't feel foolish, they felt violated, their faces etched with a cold, hard resentment for those who had preyed on their complacency. The Green Living initiatives, exposed as a vile scam, left a permanent stain on every street, a reminder of how easily good intentions could be weaponized. My fence remained a jagged, broken maw, a monument to their invasion. We had won the legal battle, yes, but the victory felt like a Pyrrhic one, leaving behind a community scarred, fractured, and irrevocably changed. The fight had ripped open the polite veneer of our suburban lives, revealing the raw, brutal truth of how power, once seized, could be wielded like a bludgeon, leaving nothing but ruin in its wake.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.